Hello plant friends! So, you're in the market for variegated monstera. What do buyers, sellers, and collectors look for when picking between one plant versus the other? I'm going to share with you my 5 things to look for, 5 tips to help you bring home your dream plant. As a buyer, seller, and collector, I love variegated monstera. I have several in my collection and I've definitely seen a ton. So in front of me I have 3 plants, and the first thing that we're going to evaluate is size, right? So in most places, size is your biggest determination of price. How much is it going to cost? Well, how big is it? This little guy right here, I would consider on the small, almost baby size. This guy in the middle is more of a medium specimen, I would consider, and this one over here, at least in the US, would be probably considered a large specimen. In terms of pricing, this guy would probably be almost twice as much as the smallest one, and then the largest one would probably be about 3 times as much as the small one. I would advise probably get the biggest plant that you can afford, but don't skip meals for it. Besides the budget consideration, you also want to think about the area and living space that you have at home. I live in a very, very small space and I have a ton of plants. So a small one like this one fits very, very comfortably among my other plants on a shelf, right? But if you have a lot of space, then a bigger one is a lot more impressive. These bigger specimens, they're showstoppers, right? They take up a lot of space, but they capture a lot of attention. You'll get a lot of comments. It adds a certain vibe to the room that's very hard to replicate with a smaller plant. So the next thing to look for is the root system. Unfortunately, I won't be able to show you guys the roots for these plants. I'm not gonna take them out of their pots because they're very comfortable in them right now. Whenever possible, you do want to ask about the root system of the plants that you're considering buying. Unless you're paying a reduced price for a cutting without roots, then obviously that's okay. You should buy a plant that has roots that you're very, very comfortable with. The roots are very important, especially if you're buying a plant online from a local dealer or a private dealer. Shipping the plant from one place to another stresses the plant out. So if you start out with a really good root ball and then you have some casualties, you'll still end up with at least a very decent root ball. And that just gives you room to wiggle as you're caring for the plant. So the third thing to look for is everyone's favorite, and that's variegation, right? That's the most important thing in the long run. It's also the reason why you're buying a variegated monstera. So what's really popular these days is half and half, or the half moon pattern, which basically one half of the leaf is variegated and the other half is essentially not. It's not a very stable variegation pattern, meaning that even if you have a plant that shows 1 or 2 leaves in a half moon style, it doesn't mean that the future plants are all going to be perfect half moons for you. But just know that when there are large patches of variegated leaves, those patches tend to be a lot more sensitive. Right? Variegation is a mutation. So for some reason or another, and I really don't know the nitty-gritty scientific rationale behind it, but the variegated parts just tend to be a lot more fragile. They tend to bruise a lot more easily, they burn, they get dark. When the variegation is dispersed or interdispersed between the non-variegated parts, I find that these parts tend to retain their stability and the leaves just act like normal leaves. Whereas when you look at my smaller one, these areas of leaf burn were essentially all in parts of the leaves that were 100% variegated. I tend to like a good distribution of variegation among my leaves just because I don't have a very humid environment. My place it just feels normal. It's not a rainforest. I don't really do too much humidity for them. I like the leaves that can kind of maintain their integrity and is a lot more stress-free for me. if you have a very, very good environment and you're just a better planter than I am, then these half moons, they're beautiful. So if you can keep them, then really, try to hunt those down. So the fourth thing to look for is fenestration, right? So fenestrations are the gaps, the splits, the holes in the leaves of the Monstera deliciosa plant that make them so lovable and the leaves so fun to look at. So this small one over here doesn't have many fenestrations, and that just implies that it's a very young plant. And then if you compare that to the big one over here, there are a lot of holes, a lot of splits. This just implies that this is a much more mature plant compared to the smaller one over here. This plant will get more fenestrations over time. The leaves that the plant currently has does not become more fenestrated, but the new leaves that come out will be more fenestrated over time as the plant ages. For me, I don't look at fenestrations for fenestration's sake. What I do is I look for fenestrations to gauge the maturity. And does the maturity matter to me? Yes, it does. Mature plants are just more predictable. If I look at this large plant over here, and you ask me, oh, what's my expectations for how the next leaf is going to be? I can say, yeah, the leaves are probably going to be around this size. The fenestrations are, they're going to be the same, and probably the variegation pattern is probably going to be very similar to this. I would say, about 30% or so variegated. Is that 100% guaranteed? No. It's just a lot more predictable with larger plants. With the small plant, if you ask me what the next leaf is going to look like, I have no idea. Is it going to be mostly green? Is it going to be half and half? I have no idea. Are there going to be fenestrations? I have no clue. So these plants, when you're dealing with younger plants, they're just a lot more unpredictable. So the next thing to look for is damage. Some damages or imperfections or deficits, it's normal, right? So it's a normal part of Mother Nature. Where imperfect, the plants are going to be imperfect. Going back to this little guy, there are several areas of leaf burn where I had to trim off the leaves. Does it suck? Yeah, I wish like the leaves were really, really perfect. But that's just a normal part of having plants like these. But just make sure that you look at your plants as thoroughly as possible to make sure that the imperfections or the damages are something that you're okay with. So these are the 5 things that I look for when critiquing different variegated Monstera plants: size, roots, variegation, fenestrations, and damages. So I do have to tell you guys there's probably a 6th thing. And that 6th thing is, does the plant speak to you? Especially as a buyer and a collector, you want a plant that just, wows you or captures your attention or brings you joy and this feeling of zen. That's why we collect plants, right? We really want plants that really speak to us. So if there's a plant out there that you find, and for some reason or another, because of those 5 things we discussed, or despite the 5 things that we discussed, it really speaks to you, then yeah, that's the plant for you. So that's it. Thank you so much for watching this episode. I hope you got something out of it. I hope it was enjoyable. Do you guys agree with the things that I look for? Did I overemphasize or underemphasize anything? Please just put in the comments below. If you found this useful at all, please like, subscribe, do all the YouTube stuff that YouTube people do. I'm hoping to get more content out soon, probably every 2 weeks or so. If there are any topics or questions or anything that you would like me to make an episode for, please just put that in the comment below and I'll try my best. And happy planting, plant friends.